I really want to start this conversation with talking about Sundance because that's when I got to see the film. And
Yay!
yeah, and I just really want to start with like how that Sundance experience was for you.
Oh my God, it was so intense. It was remarkable. It was a singular experience. I've never, I have nothing to compare it to. I was like, it almost feels like my wedding, but like 4 days in a row. Like that's like the closest thing I can compare it to, because it was just like an overload, of like in every possible way. And then it also is just like heaven, like it's so intense and you're like, oh my God, this is too much for my system. And then you're like, I never want to leave because the way they're honoring film, the way they're talking about art, you're so inspired. You want to leave immediately and go make another film. Like, so it was just, I had never been before. So I didn't even fully grasp that there was a place on earth that respected film and filmmaking this much. And so, yeah, so it felt like a dream. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still processing it. I'm still like, people are like, was it fun? And I'm like, well, fun isn't the word because it was the most intense experience of my life, but it was wholly positive. So I don't know what the word is, but it was incredible.
Sundance certainly has that experience. This is my second year covering it in person, and so I'm very happy for you and excited for the film to have premiered there. I guess I also kind of want to know, what does it mean to you to have Suncoast having premiered at Sundance to as an introduction to the world?
Well, I like watching people try to say Suncoast and Sundance and Searchlight in the same conversation. People are like, "What was it like going to Searchlight with Sundance?" And I'm like, "No, not exactly." Um, and myself too included. No, I mean it was what we wanted so badly. That was like our vision board place. Was like we want to submit to Sundance. We were all throughout post. We were keeping an eye on the calendar. We'll be able to, can we submit this year? And one of our producers would just like, she's been to Sundance before and with Tangerine with Sean Baker,
Mhm.
and so she was just like, we're getting in, like she was like, I know we're getting in, and I was more cautiously optimistic of like, I hope
Mhm.
we get in, but that's such a massive thing, and there were so many films. I think there was more films submitted than ever before. So yeah, so it was just a massive thing. But when they called, yeah, it was just like an out of body experience. It was just so exciting, and that audience, loves movies so much, and Searchlight was so excited and supportive, and yeah, it's just been like a really wonderful experience.
I'm really happy for you, and I'm happy that that was the case for Suncoast at Sundance with Searchlight.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, for people who are maybe just discovering the film or maybe wanting to know more about it, can you give a brief synopsis on what Suncoast is about?
Yes, Suncoast is, it's a coming of age story about a 17-year-old girl whose brother is being moved into hospice at the beginning of the movie. And it turns out he's being moved into hospice where Terry Schiavo is residing. And there's a lot of protesters outside. There's a lot of media. It's right at the center of her life, of, Terry Schiavo's story is kind of culminating in this moment where this 17-year-old girl is her life is, everything's culminating as well. So it was based on my experience. My brother was in hospice with Terry in 2005 when I was 18. But it's, there's a lot of comedy in the movie. When I sort of give that description, I'm also like, it's funny that, and people are like, that doesn't sound funny at all. But there is a lot of lightness, there's a lot of comedy. It's sort of a teen comedy alongside of a coming of age dramedy.
That's actually interesting that you mentioned about the genre, how it's kind of a dramedy. There's drama, but there's also comedy to it. One of the things I wanted to know more about is your writing process. So your background is really in acting and writing, primarily for TV, correct?
Comedy television, yeah,
Yeah.
exclusively, yeah.
So I'm so interested in knowing more about that experience that you've had with writing for TV and comedy, and how that translated into how you chose to write this movie and what you and the decisions that you made in telling this story.
Yeah, I think that my personal life became more and more about emotions, like as I became more introspective and started going to therapy and reading more books, and I started to become obsessed with emotions and human behavior and why we do the things we do and why we feel the things we feel. But then I would go to work every day and write for like comedy, sitcom television shows that were more about jokes and physical humor and And so I wanted to figure out a way to kind of marry my personal life and the things that I was starting to value with my career. And so I thought that this story was a good way to kind of bring everything together and sort of talk about real people with real emotions and not be afraid to go too heavy where some comedy shows just can't go, but then also find ways to keep it light and keep it comedic.
Yeah, something that struck me about this. So just writing a coming of age story, I'm sure is a challenge enough by itself. But it's so interesting how many different narratives are woven into Suncoast. I mean, there is this coming of age story with Doris, who's the main character. But there's also this interesting mother-daughter conflict that is going on in the film as well, kind of a tangent of that coming of age component. There's kind of a social aspect to Doris's life that she's trying to get familiar with, and then there's the activism component as well, which Woody Harrelson's character is more attached to. Talk about
Yeah.
weaving all of that into one story.
Oh God, good question. I really, it really it came from wanting to figure out a way to sort of have all these different points of view on grief,
Mhm.
and all these different emotions that you might feel while you're going through the end of someone's life. Um, so that was the sort of desire, that was like my sometimes when I start writing, I have like a reason for telling a story, like what's the thing I want to sort of express. And for this, it was grief and all the different ways that I saw people behave and the ways that I behaved. And this idea that we want there to be a right way to do it, but there's not a right way to do it. And that's okay. And so it came from that, and it came from wanting to also, since we're set in this world of Terry Schiavo in 2005, I wanted to have someone from the protest side of the story have a prominent role in the movie. I wanted to get that point of view. And yeah, so it was kind of all these different parts, sitting with them and kind of honing them over a few years of I know I have all these things I want to do, but how do I use these characters to do that?
Yes. Speaking of characters, let's talk about casting for a second because you have a pretty stellar cast in this movie. We have Nico Parker who plays Doris. Laura Linney plays her mom Christine, and then as I mentioned, Woody Harrelson is one of the protesters and a really interesting kind of mentor character for Doris. On top of some other great performers as friends of Doris's as well. Tell me about working with this cast, like casting the film and then working with this cast as an actor yourself.
Yeah, well, we had only the script. I knew I wanted to direct the movie, and then we had the script, and then we started approaching, we approached Woody Harrelson for Paul first because he was the person that I sort of was in my mind when I was writing the character. So we approached him first, and he was interested in doing the movie, so that kind of opened the gates to the actresses that we were, fantasizing about. Like if you have Woody attached to your movie, then you can, for a first time director, actors are really trusting you. So Woody thankfully trusted me enough, and then Laura Linney trusted me enough and came on board, um, and she's so amazing. Oh my God, she's so amazing. And then Searchlight came, and then from there we had a casting director and we started reading people, and um, the young kids are just so amazing. And it's funny, we at first we were like, okay, we should have an acting coach on set because some of these kids are 17 years old, and I want to make sure that we support them as well as we can. And then you meet these kids and they've all been acting since they were two. I mean, they've been in the business for so long. They're like, they don't need acting coach. They're like so on it. It was amazing. I'm rehearsing with them. You're like, oh, these kids are on it. So yeah, they were just every single one of them. We got so lucky because being a first time director, I was nervous, like I can't teach someone how to act, like I'm going to be focusing on so many other things and
Mhm.
be able to give someone a few notes or something or a few thoughts, but not be able to really get in there and be like, okay, now I teach you how to act. And with kids sometimes you have to do that, but these kids needed nothing. They barely needed notes. Yeah, they're amazing.
That's so awesome. Staying on the kids for just a second, one thing that kind of struck me, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but one thing that I was thinking when looking at the group dynamic of the high schoolers, is that there was this interesting glimmer of like Mean Girls with the group and like the type of characters that there are. But it's kind of cool because it's a group as if Regina George wasn't Regina George, right? I think that with that Mean Girls perspective, it really kind of subverted my expectations. Like, when is the toxicity going to come in? And
Yeah.
that wasn't the case here. Tell me more about writing that into the movie, and if that was kind of a part of your experience, or if that was a big message that you wanted to get across.
It's funny. I wish I could say it was like I was like, no, I wanted to flip a trope, but on its head. But it really was just me going, what did my friends act like when I was going through that? And they all were very supportive and very kind and, very like sad. And I'm sorry you're going through this, but they didn't always know the perfect thing to say or, because they're kids. And so it was really just trying to capture that feeling, of like your friends are different than you because they're not going through this astronomically hard thing, but they're still good people. And so I never experienced cruelty, especially amongst girls. Like I loved my girlfriends, and so people comment on this a lot about they're waiting for the girls to turn, but then you get to the end of the movie and you're like, wait, why would they turn? Like, why would they say like your brother's sick, you can't sit with us? Like no one does that. So it's like it's interesting. We're so conditioned to think girls are going to behave that way, but then in hindsight you're like, oh, no one would ever do that. So it really is just trying to find their humanity and grounding them in what I experienced.
Yeah, and I really love that that was the approach that you took. Again, it just subverting expectations when it comes to what we expect from
Yeah.
characters in media. And time and place for everything, but the characters you wrote here really did your goal justice here.
Thank you.
So yeah, well done on that. One more question. I really just want to know what you want the biggest takeaway for this movie to be for people that see it, and what you want them to walk away with.
you know it's really about grief. It's ultimately about grief, and it's a very light-hearted kind of look at that. So my hope is that it's a movie people can watch with their family, and they can watch it again and again, and it doesn't feel too heavy, it doesn't feel too much of a bummer, but it does open up conversations about grief, about death, about we all behave in different ways when someone's dying, and ideally the takeaway from the movie is that there's not really a perfect way to do it. You're not going to be perfect at it. You might be there, that you might not be there. You might be angry, you might shut down, you might hold on too tight, you might detach, but like it's hard enough, and then we judge ourselves and we judge each other. And ideally you can take away this idea that like we don't have to be so hard on ourselves or each other. We're all just kind of doing the best we can.
That's great. Again, congratulations on this film. Congratulations on it being at Sundance and then rolling out to the public on Hulu. Really am excited for more people to see the film, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next in your career.
Yay, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you.